All right. Well, thanks for coming to the channel here today, folks. Today we have Arimar Otero, a state attorney. We're going to be talking about how to protect your kids for the future, how to plan for things around your kids, how to save money for them, what you should be doing to protect them in some worst case scenarios. So, Arimar, glad to have you on the channel here.
Thank you so much, Al. I'm very happy to be here and working together and being able to educate the community about the importance of planning for your kids' future. And that's why we're here today to give you a little bit of education and little tidbits and things that you should be knowing. My name is Aurimar Otero. I'm an estate planning attorney, as Al just mentioned. And yeah, part of my job is to help you organize your assets, make sure that everything is organized and clear for your loved ones in case something happens, something unexpected happens, and make sure that things are in the best way possible for your loved ones, and they will know what to do in case something happens to you. Yes.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I think the big thing that we see a lot of clients don't think of planning for this stuff. You don't think, what should I do or should I have in place somewhere to happen to me or my spouse? What happens to the kids? So we're not getting into the details of that today, and maybe why it's important to do some of these things and what you can start doing from a savings point on our end of investing and what that looks like too. So I think the first thing that people always ask us is, how do you save for college? Right.
Yeah.
And it's always a big question. And on our end, we use different strategies. There's a 529 plan. There's the Coverdale plans. There is also a Florida prepaid. We're in Florida. Also other state prepaid plans out there. And there's also some normal brokerage account, custodial account you can save into. And to kind of just touch briefly on those, the one big one people are utilizing today is the 529 plan. And a big reason for that is new rule change happened recently. I know you saw this, Sarimar, but basically you're able to move money from the 529 over to a Roth IRA. Your kid can after college, so they don't use the money in there. They can convert it to a Roth. And the problem with these plans was that you always had to pay a penalty to take the money out if you didn't use it for college. They
Mhm.
kind of forgave some of that a little bit. Did you see that recently? It happened.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think that this is a great change that has happened, and I know that you mentioned it to me, and this is why it's so important to keep the relationship with someone that it's updated in the topic, because yeah, it can be a really important tool, especially when you're planning for college, and that penalty, I know that was a big thing, so a lot of people weren't really taking advantage of it. And yeah, being able to also transfer it to a Roth IRA and plan it for their retirement and their future, I think it's a big thing because it helps them also to to build their finances and protect their future later on.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot now. People are more willing to save into these kind of plans. The other thing too, which kind of goes on the estate side of things as well, is like a custodial account. So instead of 529, some tax benefits to it. So it's good to do. But if you really want full liquidity and don't want to have any sort of Roth, even a Roth with the 529, a custodial account, a normal brokerage account, you can buy stocks with. And one strategy we use to help with clients is when your kid gets old enough, you can gift those stocks to your kid. And if they're not on your payroll anymore, if they're off your tax return, if they were to sell those stocks and they make under $40,000 a year, they don't pay taxes on the appreciated growth on the stocks in that account. So that's kind of one unique strategy we utilize there, which kind of also goes into play if your kids inherit that account. They also don't pay taxes on it either because they get a step up in cost basis. Just kind of more
Right.
into things
Yes.
on that end.
Yes. Now, all of these tools are super important. And when I'm meeting with families and for the first time, I need to learn a lot of details about them. So all these little things that Al is mentioning, whether you have already done them, whether you have already worked with him and now you're coming to me, I'm gonna need to learn, have you set up a 529 for your children? Have you set up a custodial account? And maybe you haven't. So I can educate you a little bit and send you to Alfred and say, hey, there are some savvy ways and some strategies that you can use to plan for your children. And by doing the plan with me, we can incorporate that in your plan, whether you decide to create a will or a trust, to make sure that that is protected and that will be transferred in a seamless way for your children. Remember that right now your children are probably minors. So we want to make sure that there's going to be a transition, that somebody is going to administer those assets for them, and that plan that you're creating today will be available and will be protected for their benefit in the way that you are envisioning it right now. So this is why all these strategies play a role, and I need to know all these details because they'll have a specific impact on your planning, and we all need to consider all of those.
Yeah, and that's like maybe a good segue into kind of next topic I want to talk about, which was, unexpected expenses with kids, like how to save for that, or what to look for if an unexpected event happens as well. Like
Mhm.
for us, we always talk emergency funds, are good to have. So if your kid, needs a couple $1,000 or something, you have something saved up on the side. But on your end, RMR, is there anything that you see, particularly with the unexpected expenses or just things to plan for the unexpected when you have young kids?
Yes. So to plan for the unexpected, usually a lot of parents, I know that these are hard, difficult conversations because we don't want to think that we're not going to be able to be there. But when you have children, it's important to try to plan as much as possible. We're trying to do a little bit of what if in the future,
Mhm.
and we're looking for people that are responsible enough that will be there to care for our children. So we need to set up a contingency plan, a what if plan, right? We're trying to save, we're trying to set up all these accounts without like a 529, but we can also do things like setting up life insurance or some other financial strategies that will be able to provide liquid money in a moment of emergency, in a moment where we don't know. So, like a life insurance can provide like a death benefit, or an amount that we can also invest or look to put, into an investment account or something. Make sure that that money will be there in case of, an emergency or anything like that. And by putting it together with your plan, we can make sure that that money will be protected and not just paid up front to your kid, which, may not be very smart, being that they're young. First of all, minors are not allowed to inherit, so they may have to go to court, appoint a guardian or a stranger to administer that money for them. And second, they're probably not mature enough, even if they're 18, to handle all that liquid money. They might want to buy a Ferrari or travel around the world, or they may not be really using it and investing it in the way that you would have for their benefits. So we can, by setting up, for instance, a trust, we can make sure that that money is protected, that is administered by a trustee or somebody that you have picked, that will be responsible and will administer that money for them. We'll make sure that that money will be used for school or for a business investment, or something that will be beneficial for them in their future, and that they can use for their well-being, for their health, education, maintenance, support, things like that.
Got it.
So yeah.
I was gonna say, so in terms of that, one thing we always get too is will and a trust, what's the difference? I think the big thing is the trust, when you have kids especially, it gives you a bit more control and helps you make sure your kids can inherit that money. Correct? The will doesn't do that. Correct.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So a will, mainly it's a good thing to have because it's a good way to set up how you're going to or who are you going to transfer your assets to. So Florida law already says who your heirs are. And by setting up a will, you can give more direction and say how you want your assets to be transferred and to who. A trust is like a will substitute, except it's a private contract and it gives you more flexibility to put more provisions there. So, for instance, you can transfer your assets to your children with asset protection. You can decide that your assets will be protected for your children in case they get married or divorced, so that a future spouse will not be, those assets will be commingling with the future spouse. And yeah, and you can also put provisions and conditions to say, I want these assets to be used for education, for support, for, I don't know, their wedding, or, you know, you can also put conditions like I only want them to receive this money if they graduate college, or, if they comply with this or that. And a trust is also a more streamlined way to transfer assets in an, easier and more streamlined, because it also helps you to avoid court, probate. It helps you to
That's a
avoid.
big thing. People
Mhm.
people don't want to go to probate. I think is always a big thing there. Who their kids, they need the money on that end. And you mentioned a couple of things there, and what I want to add on is you were to pass away, and you were the breadwinner of the family. Maybe it's a dual income household, maybe it's a one income household. That definitely matters on that end. And I would say if definitely the one income households, one spouse makes 200 grand a year, the other spouse stays at home with the kids. If that one spouse making 200 grand a year passes away, you need to have a plan for income after that. Or of course both parents pass away, of course, and the kids need to have some sort of income. What we're saying, like take care of them, needs to have some income to help take care of your kids, and that's kind of where making sure you are properly insured. I think especially younger parents, you might not have as much assets today, so the need for insurance actually is higher when you are younger as opposed to when you are older. If you're a 60-year-old parent and you have $1 million in your 401k, not as big of a concern at that point. But parents in their 30s and 40s, definitely something to think about to make sure, one, what kind of insurance you have through work, and also what insurance you have outside of work. One thing that happens a lot, if you end up getting sick, for instance, we've seen this happen, if you have your insurance plan through work and then you end up getting fired or you leave because maybe you get cancer and you can't work anymore and you leave and you pass away 2 years later, you don't have that insurance plan anymore. And you had cancer, you're probably not getting insured once you leave work. So what we would say, it's nice to have maybe a term policy, something simple outside of work that is able to cover everything. You have it, and it can be very cheap to get, frankly. And it could be worth it on that end, just to have for maybe a 20-year, 10-year, 15-year term that can give you that insurance on that end. Is that something you see a lot, Armor, on your end, or?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I mentioned to my clients, and because a lot of them do have these plans from work, like, a lot of companies, big companies, provide the retirement accounts, the life insurance. And another thing that you just touched upon is what happens if the breadwinner or one of the parents can't work anymore, then they're not making money that month if they have a disability or something like that. So it can, I feel like sometimes it can be overwhelming because there are a lot of tools that are available, and this is why it's important to consult with the experts and someone like you to get the guidance and understand, okay, so we don't want to think about it and we want to think that we're healthy, but things happen, and things happen to young people too sometimes. And this is not about calling the bad thing that is going to happen. It's just about being careful, being preventive, and understanding that this could happen to anybody, and getting the proper guidance and just the peace of mind. I already took care of this, and if something happens, we're going to be protected, we're going to be okay. So Alfred can, provide the guidance as to, look at the policy that you have with your work. Is that going to be enough? What happens if you can't work there anymore? If there is, if you're unemployed, maybe you're going to need disability insurance. And as as I understand, a lot of these insurance don't, there are minimal, like the payments are not that high, and you can see the cost benefit of having these structures versus not having them.
Correct. Yeah. And really, the disability, the term, it can be pretty on the cheap side. You don't have to get very expensive on that end just to make sure your family is covered on that. So like a term policy, you can probably get for, $50 a month. You can get a term policy and probably have it cover a decent amount of insurance, depending on your health and what that looks like. Same for disability. It's those things that disability, especially, you mentioned if you can't work anymore, but you're still alive, you still got to pay the bills and probably your medical bills too. So you have to make sure that you're covered on that end as
Yeah.
well. And a lot of places have that. But if you're a business owner and you work for yourself, odds are you don't have that benefit. You probably need to get that on your
True.
own. And that's something that we do help clients kind of figure out how much do you actually need on that end too. Um,
Yes.
which kind of, I guess, going towards that, and I guess that's one topic there. But one thing we want to talk about too, kind of finishing off our conversation, was transferring assets to your kids. You kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but if someone has a 401k or a brokerage account or a house, what are the best ways to give that to your kids, or at least plan for that? Where if it does happen prematurely, there's a plan in place, or if it happens later on, it's all set up and good to go. What are the best ways to set that up from an account standpoint, or trust or will?
Yeah. Yeah. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I like to meet with my clients and educate them, which is a little bit of what we're doing today. So when I meet with them, I look at their current situation and I look at what would happen today under your current circumstances. Um, Having a will or a trust is not a one size fits all. So we need to look specifically as to whether this makes sense for this particular client. And yes, having a trust is usually more beneficial. It's usually going to have more flexibility. It's going to offer more options and tools and benefits to protect your loved ones. However, yeah, we need to look at specifically your particular circumstances. Do you have children? Have you set up, do you have what are your goals for them in the future? Do you want to set, is it important for you for them to go to school to achieve higher education? Um, so we need to really meet and learn more about the family, their goals, their family dynamics, their costumes, their culture. Is it important for you to travel? Is it important for you that your children have relationship with other family members? Who is going to take care of your children? So all of these things, and then okay, so maybe having a trust, if you want to avoid probate, if you want your house to avoid having to go to court, if you want to avoid the expenses and the delays, and having a stranger, which is the judge, make decisions for you, then most likely putting things into a trust will be more beneficial. So I know not a lot of people are familiar with what a trust is and how it works, and I like to explain it as like a bucket or a box where we're putting our assets. We're retiring all our assets in the trust. Our house is going to be in the trust, our bank accounts, any accounts that we set up with Al, like any retirement accounts or anything, we're also going to incorporate it in the trust so that everything is contained in there. And if something happens to you, that's going to be transferred directly to the people that you love in the way you want. And you're going to also set up somebody like a trustee or somebody that you know and trust that is going to make sure to administer that and um transfer it or divide it in the way that you want. So there are a few ways to do it. And like I said, we have to look at each case specifically with each client and discuss what is more important for them and make sure that that plan is going to work exactly when they need it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the big thing for us too, when we look at assets going to kids, people always ask, well, what are the best assets to give to kids? When people who are retired and they want to spend their money down, they're trying to figure out what's the best thing to spend or what is best to use. And there are definitely some accounts that are better than others. To give quick examples, like a 401k typically is the worst to give to your kids because they got to pay tax on that money
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to them. So if you're thinking about, hey, what should you try and leave for your kids? The 401k is probably last in that list just due to the tax effects that would happen if they inherited it. Where a Roth account, kind of the opposite of a 401k that grows tax free, that might be the best thing to give to your kids because they actually can keep that money in the Roth account for 10 years and have it grow tax free and then take it out at year 10. So that's a great tax-free investment to give to your kids. Your house or stocks that you own, when your kids inherit that, they get a step up in cost basis. So if they inherit it and sell it the next day, they're not going to owe any taxes on that money either. So it's important to know that too, because we're looking at how much money are your kids actually going to receive after taxes. That's important to look at. Life insurance, a death benefit, that's tax free. So you can add that, that's tax free in there. So you want to make sure you look at everything you have. And when you're planning all this out, talking to me, talking to Armar, and figuring out what should you be doing, how much do your kids need and will they receive, taxes play a large part in that. So figure out what's the net that your kids will receive after taxes, after everything's paid. So you have an idea of what that looks like. So it's good to know
Yeah.
these things going forward and figuring out the best way to actually give these assets to your kids down the line, or if you pass away prematurely, what's actually going to go to them after they pay everything on
Right.
that.
And on that point, Alfred, just to clarify, so you do you find yourself doing many Roth conversions for your clients?
Yeah, right now especially, we're seeing a lot of Roth conversions. A big part of that is paying taxes today versus the future. If
Mm-hmm.
you're in a position where paying taxes today makes more sense than waiting to pay taxes later on, then yes, a conversion, especially the next 2 years, I think makes a lot of sense going forward. Because tax rates are a bit lower historically right now. In 2026, we might see rates go up, depending on the election that's coming up here and also what happens in Congress. But odds are we're seeing tax rates go up in 2026 as of right now.
Yeah.
So important to know if you have a low income this year, or for whatever reason it's a lower income, you might want to do a conversion while you can to pay lower taxes on your money overall.
Right. Yeah. So on that note, part of our services and part of what we're looking at when we're meeting with you is also the tax aspect. So as Alfred said, yes, what the retirement accounts, usually 401ks and IRAs are important to look at and see how, yes, if you have those assets and your children or your loved ones are going to inherit that, what might be the most tax savvy way to pass it on. So we include some language in which they will be receiving those minimum those minimum what is it called, the distributions that are required, so that they won't be so burdened with the tax penalty every time they have to withdraw money. Another thing regarding the taxes, there is something called the estate taxes, which is the tax that is paid after somebody passes away. And as Al said, right now it's not much of a concern because all of us, if we are U.S. residents or U.S. citizens, we have a what is called an exemption amount. Right now it's up to 13.6 million. So that means anything that you own below that amount will be exempt from taxes. And in Florida, thankfully, we don't have an estate tax. We only have the federal one. But yeah, depending on who wins the election right now, it already looks like we may be that going lower. So,
5.6, I believe, it's the new,
yeah,
correct?
yeah. So it might be reverting to what it was during the Obama government, which was around the 5 million, and it might be adjusted with inflation and whatnot. So we can't really know. And there are planning strategies that we can use to help prevent your estate having to pay up to 40% in estate taxes, depending on the value of your estate. So that's why we need to look at everything you own, the estimated value of your estate, what kinds of assets you have, how they're titled, and all these things to help you plan in the best way.
Correct. And the state tax is a big tax. I mean, 40% is nothing to joke about. So if you are above that, that is something you want to look at and make sure you're planning for. And there's trust that you can do. There's certain ways to title your assets to help prevent that from going over the limit. There's things that we discuss a lot of time with our clients in terms of taxes and what we can do to prevent that before you pass away. There's ways to retitle things, do things certain ways. So definitely something to look at. There's charity distributions. There's things that always look at as they get older in terms of what that looks like there, that give your kids more money. And ultimately, it's not just giving them more money, but you can give them more money or give the government more money. You can decide which one you want to give it to per se. Normally, kids and charity are first in my book, then government can get what remains after that. So we try and maximize what your goals are and what you want to do on that standpoint. But I think that was a lot of info. I think where people are on this, on kids and what to do, and kind of got in different areas of beginning stages, but also if you're thinking of, hey, planning for giving money to kids, what does that look like? I guess any closing takeaways for you on your end? You want to make sure we,
Um, No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of important stuff. The financial aspect is definitely very important, and I'm sure is one of the main things that parents are concerned about. On my end, I just wanted to mention briefly that a part of our services are also appointing guardians or appointing legal guardians. Make sure who is going to raise your children and who is going to be there for them if you can't be there. So whether you want them to go to private school or what type of education you want them to have or raising the values, all of that we help you with. And remember, it doesn't have to be the same one that it's administering their money. It can be different roles. That way there is a check and balance. And the guardian who is taking care of the child can, check with the trustee or the administrator to make sure that the main necessities of your child are being covered, their school, their doctor appointments, and all of those things. So we built something to protect your children. It's comprehensive, appointing guardians. Remember that we're not planning just for death, we're also planning for disability in case you can't work, if something happens to you, who can be there and yeah, pay your bills and do all your things. So it's important to think of these things and have a plan.
yeah, and I to add on to that too, it kind of popped in my head. Power of attorneys are a big one too, which we
Mhm.
really talk about. But for yourself, you should have power of attorneys. So for your health and your wealth, you should have a power of attorney that helps if you can't make decisions anymore. Maybe your kids are helping you make those decisions, and you have to assign a power of attorney for that. Your kids might be arguing on what to do. If you're in a coma and they're deciding whether to pull the plug or not, the
Mhm.
power of attorney makes a decision. Otherwise, your kids could be arguing on what to do with you, which
Yeah.
you want to avoid if you can, and have maybe also things in there that says, hey, if X happens to me, this is what I want to have happen, which kind of gives some dialogue to help people make a decision if you're unhealthy. But the other thing with power attorneys too, and I don't know if you do too much of this, but when your kids turn 18, they are now adults.
Mhm.
If your kid goes to the hospital when he's 19 years old in college, and you want to call the hospital for information, they're not going to give it to you, right, Armar? Yeah, unless you have a power of attorney, they
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
in there. So it's
Yeah.
important to have that. I mean, for even your kids turn 18, if you're paying their
Mhm.
bills,
Yeah.
it's good to have that set up so you can talk to the doctor on
Mhm.
their behalf and help make decisions.
Yeah, that's right. The privacy laws regarding health records they're very strict here in the country. It's called the HIPAA laws. It's a federal law as well. So the minute your child turns 18, they're already an adult, as Al just mentioned. So when you are their parent, you're their legal guardian, and you can, talk to the doctor, make all their healthcare and legal and financial decisions. But the minute they turn 18, that changes. So unless they do a power of attorney naming you or naming a loved one as, their representative, their agent, or the person that can access their health records and make decisions regarding their treatment or diagnosis or anything like that. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to court and ask the judge for permission before you can make any decisions for your child, and
Which could be lengthy if you're going
which
to
could be
court.
lengthy and annoying, and you're going through a difficult time. And also regarding that point that I was also mentioning about making those decisions ahead of time, whether, pulling the plug, if you're in a vegetative state or a terminal condition. Some people say, oh, let my children make that decision. But what I've heard from most people is that having the parents make the decision themselves saves them so much distress at the moment, because these decisions are very hard, and we're usually wondering what would my dad or what would my mom have wanted, and having them make that decision ahead of time just take a big burden out of them and a big headache, and also prevents them having conflict between among them, and seeing who decides what happens. So these are also important things to consider.
Yeah, good things to mention. I'm glad we kind of had that last little segment there. It's important to have people don't realize that the power of attorneys and how important those really are,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
what that looks like. So I think that kind of wraps up our conversation today. I'm glad having you on here. It's really great. A lot of great information. We got a lot out of it as we talk through it. But thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
No, thank you, Al. And I think that we have seen how our professions converge and how we both can, contribute and help each other. And we need to stay in constant communication to help our clients in the best way.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. We'll see you guys next time. Just subscribe and like the channel if you haven't done so already. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.